This is I Read It, so you don't have to.
Hey everyone, before we get started with this week's video, I wanted to take a minute to thank my friend Red Celt for the new background video, YouTube banner, and YouTube profile picture. He did a great job, and if you want to look him up, his contact info will be in the description down below. Another thing is my beautiful wife is out of town this week, so I have to do all the voices myself. We want to get to a point where we're consistently switching up, where I read the male voices and she reads the female voices. Just so that way it's a little bit more dynamic and not just one person doing everything. So again, just please bear with us and we'll try to get into a better groove in the future. Thanks. Enjoy the show. Our first Reddit post comes from Zany Bays. So for a backstory, I work in a bakery and a medium-sized grocery store. Apart from baking and slicing and packaging breads, pies, and other pastries, I also have to clean all the dishes and clean my department floors when I work the closing shifts. A mid-shift worker also helps with the responsibilities until their shift ends, along with the department manager who usually leaves a couple hours after my shift starts. When I was working a few weeks ago, I came from the back where we wash our dishes to help this lady, we'll call her B, who was standing near our counter by the bread slicer with an attitude. I'm assuming she was mad because she had to wait because the mid-shift worker was busy with another customer. I came over and she tossed the bread on the counter and just said, "Slice this." I guess she's having a rough day. No problem. I just want to get her out of here, so I politely say, "Yes, ma'am," and grab a pair of gloves and start to put them on. B. "You're not going to wash your hands?" Me. "Oh, no, ma'am. I already washed them before I came out here." B. "Bullshit. I don't want you to touch my bread with those nasty-ass hands." Me. "I mean, I can wash them again if you want." B. "You know what? Don't bother." B then goes to another department and asks for our department manager, and then starts yelling at him in front of the bakery and other people, pointing at me and telling him that I don't wash my hands and that I'm disgusting, and ends up calling me a cracker. How dated. My manager tries to calm her down, and he ends up washing his hands and cutting her bread to make her leave. I explain the situation to my manager, and he basically says just to wash my hands in one of the sinks up front next time. And if she comes back and tries causing a scene, to let him know and he will tell her to leave. And after talking to the store manager, he also told me the same thing. Fast forward to yesterday. B comes back later towards closing time, where both the mid-shift and department manager are gone. So I'm the only one working in the bakery. She's holding bread to be sliced again, and hasn't noticed it's me when she asked me to slice her bread. Until I reach out my hand to get the bread and she stops and said, "No, you're not helping me," with a rude look on her face. I immediately smile and say, "No worries, have a nice night." And I walked to help another lady and then walked into the back to clean dishes. A few minutes later, I hear her yelling, "Excuse me." So I walk back up and say, "Yes, ma'am." She gives me another rude look and says, "Is no one going to help me?" Me. "No, ma'am. I'm the only one in the bakery." B. "Then wash your freaking hands and slice my bread." Me. "No, ma'am. I'm not serving you. I'm sorry. Have a nice night." B. "You are slicing my freaking bread. You have to." Me. "No, ma'am. You told me not to serve you. Have a nice night." And I walk in the back to clean more dishes. B ends up throwing her bread on the ground, and my store manager comes and tells her she needs to leave for causing a scene, and threatens to call the cops if she doesn't. So B leaves, but not without more screaming and name-calling. I tell my store manager what happened, and he told me I should have handled it better, and to get him if it ever happens again. Whatever. It felt great. Way to hold your ground, OP, and just let this be a lesson that the customer is not always right. Our next Reddit post is by Rexy109. So this happened to me a few years ago, when people were allowed to roam the vast city streets without a mask. I am one of the 3 co-owners of a local tech company which also provides tech support. Now, one of our big-time clients was an office for whom we had deployed 3 of our 4 servers and provided special tech support as they were one of our OG clients. Now, the storage servers that we deployed in the firm were old and had started to wear down and get slow. So we suggested to replace them with new, more reliable ones. And the owner, a very douchebag of a dude, decided to wait till the weekend, as they had a very huge and crucial project going on and he didn't want any time wasted as they were near the deadline, about a week left, and told us to get the new servers ready to go, basically get everything put together and all the software installed and so on. So we could just swap the servers and use the remaining time to check for errors, transport the necessary files for ongoing projects from the old servers to the new ones, and all that stuff. Now, the office had an employee who would look after and approve any and all repairs related with the servers. we too had to get his approval for any repairs, unless we had direct consent from the owner. So here's the cast. Me, Elliot, and the owner. So around 4 to 5 days before the new servers had to be deployed, we went and did our routine checkups on the servers, and found a major issue that could lead them to crash hard. Hard. Like not being able to get work again hard. So like anyone would do, we wanted to resolve the issue. Luckily, it was nothing we hadn't seen before. In fact, we predicted that it may occur, and it would only cause a few hours worth of downtime. So we sent an email to Elliot that contained all the details of the issue and asking for approval for the resolve/repairs. Elliot flat out within seconds responded with a big no. We sent an email again asking if he was sure and stuff, and gave more details about the issue and how all the servers may crash if the issue wasn't resolved. He again responded with a no. So I called the owner and he said to do as Elliot says. When I told him that Elliot said no, he said, "Then don't do it." I asked for that in writing. He said okay, and around 10 minutes later we got an email stating the conversation I had with him. So we left it at that. The next day we get a frantic call from the office saying that the servers had crashed and how they were behind schedule and couldn't get any work done, and how it was our job to make sure the servers were working correctly, and how we were going to pay for their losses. I then calmly tell them that we in fact had told them about the issues and how serious they were. The owner goes insane and says that we hadn't told them about the issues, but when I sent him the email chain between us, Elliot, and him, he shut up and knew he couldn't do anything. He asked us to hurry up with new servers and hung up. The next weekend we deployed their new servers. The best part is, what would have only costed them an hour of downtime and repairs ended up costing them 4 days of downtime and possibly a lot of money as they were late to finish the project. And yeah, Elliot was probably canned because I never saw or heard from him again, as I came to know a new and more awesome employee the next time we went in for repairs. You know, I don't think I'll ever understand hiring somebody to do something for me and then tell them how to do their job. Just doesn't make sense. This next Reddit post is from Bolivar Shagnasty. About 15 years ago, I was in high school and started working at a new subway in my town. This was right when the decor changed from a New York City subway map to the vegetables and shit all over the walls. The owners were very adamant that we only got paid for our schedule and not for the actual time we worked. I didn't think much of it because I never really had a job before. It was after my first few shifts I realized this was bullshit. I'd get paid for working from 5 to 8, but I'd have to stay until almost 9 because the dinner rush was rough and prep needed to get done. After a few pay periods, we high school employees raised the question with the owners and told them our time slips didn't match our paychecks. They said that we knew we only got paid for our schedule and not total hours worked. At the time, a buddy was dating a girl whose mom worked for the State Department of Labor. He brought up the issue with his girlfriend's mom and got an investigation started. The problem with the State Labor Department is that investigations are announced ahead of time. They were notified that the state was interested in pay discrepancies and were going to review payroll and compare it to the time clock records. But those gears grind slowly. Before the hammer fell, we had a new policy quickly implemented that said we were only allowed to work the hours we were scheduled and not a minute more. Cool. Glad that's in writing. Things went okay for a few weeks with only occasional managerial grumblings about having to work more now that we all left at our own time on the dot. Then our city hosted a travel baseball tournament at a park about a mile from our store. You can probably see where this is going. We get busloads of people in our little shopping complex and a line out the door when my shift ends at 1. Deuces, guys! The manager/owner's son is in the office watching The Matrix when I go to clock out. He gets all pissy about the line and says I have to stay and help. I asked if I'd get paid for the extra time. He said, "You only get paid for your scheduled time," and trailed off. He knew he was fucked. He didn't have the ability to authorize more payroll expenses without also calling his management into question. Sorry. As I'm walking out the front, we weren't allowed to park in the back near the door. He starts following me out and shouting in front of the customers. He fired me on the spot and demanded I give back my Subway shirts. No! You took $15 per shirt out of my first paycheck. They're mine. He followed me out into the parking lot, cussing me out in English and Spanish until I drove off. The line was still there when I pulled out. I found out later that afternoon that 2 other people quit after their shifts ended because the job was shit, the pay was shit, and the motherfuckery was boundless. The absentee owners eventually called each of us and asked us to come back. One of us did. I didn't. My other friend didn't either. I actually got a job at a different Subway that was a piece of cake compared to the job I got fired from. All the employees eventually got their back pay after the Labor Department investigation dust settled. They settled with the state to pay everyone 300% of their missing wages and had to pay for annual audits for 5 years to ensure they weren't breaking the law again. It got so bad that Subway's parent company, Doctors Associates, sent a team down to dick slap the owner into compliance with state and federal labor laws. All this because they didn't want to pay us our minimum wage for the extra half hour or so per day. Man, stories like this kill me, OP. It's like they didn't want to pay an extra $3.50 an hour because they didn't want to pay you more than what you were supposed to work. But in the end, they ended up having to pay 300 times that. And who knows how far back this goes? Years? I mean, the losses from that alone is astronomical. Our final Reddit post is from Good Time Charlie. In 2007, I joined the Navy. I was 26. In 2008, we went on deployment, and I was a lowly E3, so most of the guys I worked with were like 18 and pretty timid yes men. Had a first class, an E6, who was just trying to ride out his time till retirement. Our chief stayed in his ass, and when he got his ass chewed, it rolled downhill. We spent most of that deployment doing ignorant shit like painting in the rain, mopping in the rain, painting spaces just to have to paint them again in a month. Me and another guy were supposed to paint a fan room for an upcoming inspection. It didn't really need to be painted, but for some reason in the military, it is a high crime for someone to have any downtime whatsoever. First class brought us over to the space that we were supposed to paint, and he opened the door and said, "I want this whole fucking room painted white. Do you understand?" "Sure thing, petty officer. We'll take care of it." He left to go sit in his chair for the day. Now, a fan room is not entirely white, just the walls and ceiling. The floor is a dark gray, and there are different colored pipes and stenciling on the pipes and directional arrows and whatnot. That's not what he said, though. He said fucking white. So me and my buddy opened a 5-gallon can of paint, and every single square inch of that fan room was painted white. Floor, walls, piping, ceiling, machinery, everything. About 8 p.m. we went to the office to let him know we were done and waiting for his approval. We were standing by. He and another first class walked up, and we knew it was coming. We also knew that he was going to have to explain it too. He opened the door, and it was so bright he could have gotten retinal burns. He closed the door and paused, opened the door, looked around, and closed the door again. He asked if we knew the floor was supposed to be gray and the piping stenciled. "Yes, petty officer." "That's not what I told you to do, though, was it?" "No, petty officer, it wasn't." They looked at each other and knew they fucked up. They weren't even mad. He just said, "Let's let this paint dry, and in a few days we'll fix the floor and piping." We ended up not even having to do it as he tasked someone else with the job. After that, I didn't get forced into doing stupid bullshit anymore. So I have to admit, I chose this story not only because it's funny, but also because I was in the Navy. I joined in 2006, and stupid stuff like this happens all the time. The part about mopping in the rain, 100% true. Can't tell you how many times I had to go outside and mop the deck while it was still raining. It was insane. And the painting is nonstop. Just think about if you were in a room, you start painting one wall, and then by the time you finish the fourth wall, you just start painting that very first wall again. And it's like that the entire time. This has been I Read It. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe.